And so in this debacle, I learned that Elon Musk is just as willing to lie, or at least say things he has no knowledge about, as is his buddy Donald Trump. But regardless of his fictions, the Republican sheep in Congress received their MAGA marching orders from Daddy Elon, and the continuing resolution was dead. The point is the ick factor of an oligarch like Elon Musk having the power to essentially get Congress to shut down a bill that would have regulated his own companies. Big ick.
I am so damn tired of being lied to. I don't think I can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies, but I'm not gonna buy it anymore.
Hello, my friend, and thank you for listening to the 308th episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. And I wasn't really planning to do an episode summarizing the end of the 118th Congress because I wasn't really expecting it to be eventful. But just like this Congress has been from start to finish, even the most simple of things are full of drama. Just like they started in the 118th Congress with a completely unnecessary 15-round vote to even pick their Speaker of the House. They then fired their Speaker of the House. This Congress has been chaos from the very start, and so of course it was chaos until the very end. And so today I'm going to fill you in on all the drama. I'll let you know what became law. I'll also let you know what didn't become law, because there was some things that actually could have helped us that we missed out on in all of this drama. And then I'll just give you some, gossipy information because we're here anyway, so why not? But the reason that I feel the need to fill you in on what is going on, it all stems from the very basic fact that Congress continues to fail to do their most basic job, which is fund the damn government on time. The government is supposed to be funded via 12 separate appropriations bills, and they are all due by September 30th every year. And once again, Congress failed to do that job. Although this Congress was worse than most, because the House, for their part, the House is supposed to start all 12 of them, but the House only finished 5, and then the Senate picked up and finished 0 of those. And so, after missing their deadline on September 30th, the funding deadline got kicked to December 20th. And then this Congress didn't even attempt to finish the job with the extra time they gave themselves. And so everyone knew that the deadline would be kicked with another continuing resolution. And a continuing resolution essentially just takes the last year's numbers and continues them until the next deadline. And so on December 16th, again, the new deadline was December 20th, so short timeline here. On December 16th, the text of the continuing resolution was released, and it was 1,547 pages long, which, as a legislative analyst, I can tell you that is far too many pages for anyone to read and fully understand before the vote. And another problem with this particular continuing resolution is that it was negotiated behind closed doors by Speaker Mike Johnson, and it was packed full of dingleberries which were trying to hitchhike their way into law along with this must-sign legislation that would keep the government open. Although I must say that not all dingleberries are bad, and there were a bunch of dingleberries that the Democrats had insisted be included in return to their votes that would be necessary since there is a sizable number of Republicans who are simply legislative wrecking balls who refuse to vote yes on any continuing resolutions. Everything important that has been done in this Congress has been done via partnership with the Republican Speaker, whoever that was at the time, and the Democrats, to the immense anger of the legislative wrecking balls who wanted to use the threat of a shutdown to get all sorts of things, an effort that failed them every single time. But the adults in the room kept our government open, so at the very least, this Congress accomplished that. And you may remember that that was a sin that cost Kevin McCarthy his speaker job. And then Kevin McCarthy resigned from Congress entirely because, his district, I guess. Apparently serving in Congress was just all about him, and so when he lost his speaker job, he was just like, I'm out. But anyway, I'll get into some of the details in a little bit about that bill that had so much in it, because there was stuff for everyone to love and everyone to hate in there. But there was one particular oligarch here in the United States who found stuff to hate, and that was Elon Musk. And so he took to the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, which he purchased and then renamed X because he's a weirdo. But he used his personal social media network to send out approximately 70 messages to the world about the CR, many of them bullshit. And I must say, he even got me with some of his bullshit. Because I knew that there was a pay raise for Congress in the continuing resolution that was 1,547 pages. And Elon Musk had put on Twitter that it was an increase in the congressional minimum wage from $174,000 a year to $243,000 a year, which I do think would be a scandal if it were true. And I regret that I put that into my Instagram story because it wasn't true. The increase only would have been to a little over $180,000 per year. And so if anyone saw that in my Instagram story and believed it, I'm very sorry. I should have checked before posting. But that wasn't Elon Musk's only instance of bullshittery. He also claimed, for example, that the original continuing resolution would have spent $3 billion in tax money on a new NFL stadium for the Washington Commanders. What a scandal! Except it wasn't true. In fact, the bill expressly said that no tax money could be used for a new stadium. It was the exact opposite of what Elon Musk said. And so in this debacle, I learned that Elon Musk is just as willing to lie, or at least say things he has no knowledge about, as is his buddy Donald Trump. But regardless of his fictions, the Republican sheep in Congress received their MAGA marching orders from Daddy Elon, and the continuing resolution was dead. And when I was recording the last episode on December 19th, I thought we were heading for a shutdown. Especially when, during this chaos, Donald Trump himself then added to the chaos by demanding an increase or suspension of the debt ceiling, which we are going to hit again sometime in January. Now, as you may know, the Republicans want to pass more tax cuts for the rich. It's one of their main priorities, which will explode the debt again, which is a very inconvenient truth that they will have to face when they need to increase the debt ceiling and expose themselves again as total hypocrites when it comes to the debt, which they clearly don't actually care about increasing exponentially since they've done it over and over again every time they get power. And they do so in servitude of rich people and war corporations. I expect the 119th Congress to be no different. And so Trump wanted the debt ceiling to be raised now so that they could get their tax cuts as soon as possible. But in an interesting change of pace, the Republicans in Congress did not do what Daddy Trump said. They defied the all-powerful orange and refused to touch the debt ceiling issue that week. And they refused quite quickly, which, maybe the all-Republican-controlled 119th Congress won't be as willing to follow Trump's lead as they were last time. We'll see. But this was definitely a big no to Trump. But by Friday, December 20th, out of nowhere, a new continuing resolution was written, and it had most of the dingleberries removed. The bill went from 1,547 pages to a readable 120 pages. And it was passed with a huge bipartisan majority in both the House and the Senate, which I do think is notable because the Democrats had all of their priorities removed that they had negotiated to get in return for their votes. But as usual, the Democrats caved because that's what they do. As for the people who voted against it in the House, where all the chaos is, they were all Republicans, and they were the same ones who always pitch a fit when government funding time rolls around. And in the 119th Congress, 20 out of the 26 people who refused to vote to keep the government open right before Christmas, 20 out of those 26 people will be returning to Congress. And so the Republican majority, when the new Congress begins, and actually, as I speak to you, it has already begun, but the Republican majority is only going to be a couple of members. And so if you are someone who is hoping that the Republicans fail to accomplish much of their tax-cutting, fossil fuel-burning, immigrant-terrorizing promises in the 119th Congress, those are the chaos Muppets who you should watch. They are the ones who can ruin Trump's show. But now that the 119th Congress has begun, that means the 118th Congress is officially over. And so I will let you know what is in the law that ended the 118th Congress in a few minutes, because first I have to remind you that Congressional Dish is listener supported. And that means that we have no corporate ads that are aired on this show, which gives me zero incentive to spin you to please any of my advertisers, because they don't exist. And we also provide all of our sources in our show notes. So that means every document, article, and timestamp of sound clips, because I think it's important for you to be able to go and listen to those sound clips in context in the hearings and make it very easy for you to do that. And when it comes to documents, I use primary sources as often as I can to inform you. And I do this because I believe strongly that trust is earned, and I think that's important in an era where it feels impossible to know who or what to trust. And if you've been listening to Congressional Dish for a while, you know all of this, and you're probably sick of hearing this over and over again. And so starting with the next episode, if you support Congressional Dish via Patreon, the paywalled golf swingless feed will also no longer contain this pitch for funding. What that means is if you are doing your part as a member of this community, you will no longer need to listen to a pitch that doesn't apply to you. And so please sign up to support the show on Patreon. The suggested amount is $5 per episode, but you get to choose how much the show is worth it to you, at least for now. And then I'll stop nagging you and save my spiel for the newbies and the freeloaders. And thank you if you are already in this category of wonderful human who has kept the show going for 6 straight Congresses and who will keep it going as I torture myself by focusing on the dysfunction of a 7th Congress. Just kidding. About the torture anyway, that's the joke. I'm serious about the dysfunction because that's damn near guaranteed. But I intend for Congressional Dish to help you navigate all the upcoming chaos. Because knowledge is power, and I am going to tell you what you need to know to best protect yourself from new laws or loopholes in current laws that affect your wealth, health, and safety. I'm creating this show because I still, even after all these years, don't know where to find this information without studying Congress myself. And so please support my work so that I can continue sharing what I find with you. Because I'll be honest, 2024 was not a good year for Congressional Dish. Congressional Dish made less money this year than last year. And remember back in May of 2023, when we hit 1,000 patrons? I was very excited about that milestone. Well, today we are at 991 paid patrons. And so that trend of support for the show going down, that needs to reverse in 2025. And I am going to be making some changes because of it. But for now, this is the big change I'm announcing today, that if you do your part, I will stop nagging you. And so please do your part. And I'll do mine, which is providing you with a show that has value. So please return the value in some kind of financial form. And all of your options are listed for you on the support page on congressionaldish.com. Okay, so now let's get into what just became law. So the official title of the law that kept our government open is the American Relief Act. I guess we're supposed to be relieved that Congress did their most basic duty by merely keeping the lights on, which honestly, yes, I am a little relieved. So the American Relief Act. And so here's what made it into law in that continuing resolution that became law a few days before Christmas. So first of all, the government is funded at 2024 levels until March 14th, 2025. And that is problematic because when the government is operating under a continuing resolution, the agencies hate it. And it basically is because it freezes the government. This is due to the fact that under a continuing resolution, government agencies are not allowed to start any new programs or start or extend any contracts. So basically, they're frozen in time and unable to adapt to any changes from, well, it will be a year and a half ago by the time the government is maybe properly funded this March. And what this also means is that our money, our tax money, is being wasted because all of the agencies have to revise their budgets and their plans to adapt to this congressional dysfunction. They can't just do what they plan to do. So that's where we are once again. This continuing resolution also included a much-needed $110 billion for disaster relief from all of the hurricanes and fires that happened this year. And then there was also an extension of the Farm Bill. Now, the Farm Bill is supposed to be renewed every 5 years, and it last expired in September 2023, which was well over a year ago. And so the Farm Bill not being properly done by the end of the 118th Congress, that is one of the biggest failures of this Congress, and we'll see if they finish the job in the 119th. The continuing resolution also extended a bunch of other programs, which happens in every continuing resolution. But I think the main point that you need to know is that there was nothing controversial in this continuing resolution that just became law, except for maybe the fact that this law adds to our ever-expanding debt, as usual, with no offsets. But just for funsies, let's see what didn't become law in that 1,547-page bill that was killed via Elon Musk's hissy fit. So first of all, there is no longer going to be a pay increase for members of Congress. Now, Elon greatly exaggerated how much that increase would have been. It would have only been for about $6,600 per year. And so what that means is that the minimum wage for a member of Congress remains $174,000 a year. Doesn't sound too bad to me. But I do have to say that members of Congress have not gotten a pay increase in a very, very long time, for as long as I can remember. And my memory of this type of stuff goes back to when I started Congressional Dish, so that's 2012. I can't remember seeing a pay increase, and if there has been one, it's only been like one. And so they haven't seen their incomes go up, even though inflation has been a thing. But I'm not shedding a single tear for members of Congress, and they are not getting a pay increase. And considering they can't do their most basic job, screw them. But there are some things in this dead continuing resolution which would have been really good for us regular people that we are missing out on because of Elon Musk and the Republicans in Congress who take marching orders from him, apparently. So, for example, there would have been more money for addiction-related health programs. There also would have been more money for pandemic preparation programs, which, I don't know, sounds like something we need based on the fact that we did such a terrible job with COVID. There also would have been a ban on a substance that could have saved lives because people are apparently using it to commit suicide, and that is a substance called sodium nitrite. And I didn't know anything about this, and so I found a news report, which I think provides a good example of why people are advocating for this substance to be banned. So this is a reporter named Sean Boyd. She reports for CBS News Colorado. And here are some pieces from her report from about a year ago in January 2024. And of course, the full segment is in the show notes for you. But here are the most important parts of her report.
If you are contemplating suicide, there is help, including the 988 hotline. But instead of helping save lives, some websites are helping people end their lives using a preservative that is widely available online and even in some sporting goods stores. A father, driven by grief, is pushing to change that.
Bennett had a really tough go of things.
Bennett Brown suffered from long-term COVID, and it exacted a toll not only on his physical but mental health. The final setback came a year ago when he lost consciousness, fell, and suffered a concussion that forced him to drop out of college.
That was a lot for him to handle.
And yet he hid the depth of his despair from everyone but an online group with a perverse mission to facilitate death. It is there he learned of sodium nitrate, a preservative used for curing meat that is deadly in a concentrated form and easily accessible. It wasn't until months later Brown learned of the trail of deaths from sodium nitrate and sounded an alarm at the state capitol.
The more families we hear from that have had this happen. So across the country, it's on the rise.
State Representative Judy Amabile has now introduced a bill to ban the sale of sodium nitrate in Colorado, except to those with commercial licenses.
And so sodium nitrate, because that continuing resolution was killed, sodium nitrate sales will still be federally legal, even though some states like Colorado are attempting to ban it individually. Now, there was a standalone bill that was written by Representative Lori Trahan, who's a Democrat of Massachusetts, that would have banned sodium nitrate, and that passed the House 376-33. A huge majority of people in both parties voted for this in May, and I should note that all the no's were Republicans. But the Senate, which has been in the control of the Democrats, specifically Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, even though this was a Democrats' bill and it passed with huge numbers in the House, he never put that bill up for a vote. And I have no idea why, because there was a plan to transfer the old RFK Stadium site to Washington, D.C. because that is where the NFL team, the Washington Commanders, would like to build a new stadium. And so that transfer makes that possible. Now, that football stadium deal was also in the continuing resolution that died. But the standalone version, which had passed the House at the end of February, the Senate passed that standalone stadium bill at 1:16 a.m. on Saturday morning, December 21st, as the Senate was on their way out the door. And so when it comes to the stadium, that bill's been sitting on President Biden's desk since December 27th, and I think he's going to sign it. I don't know why he wouldn't, unless he's like a secret Eagles fan or something, which would be hilarious, but I do expect him to sign it. But the point is that the Senate got the stadium deal done. And so why couldn't they at least try to get the sodium nitrate ban done the same way? I have no answers for that. We also, due to the death of the original continuing resolution, are not going to get the Take It Down Act, which would have created a platform where individuals could have reported the unauthorized sharing of their nudie pics and sex tapes. And then, once verified, online platforms would have been required to promptly remove that reported content. Now, that dingleberry also included punishments for the people who would have been posting their revenge porn images, and those punishments would have been up to 2 years in prison, plus a financial fine if the images were of adults, or 3 years in prison if the images were of a minor, which is someone, of course, who is under the age of 18. But then there were also punishments for threatening to post revenge porn, which would have been quite severe for simply making a threat, which would be up to 1.5 years in prison for threatening this to adults and 2.5 years in prison for just threatening minors. And so I'm actually not so sure how much I love this bill. I feel like people should be punished for what they do, not for what they say. But regardless, this bill appears to be the standalone version written by Republican Senator Ted Cruz, and it passed the Senate just a few weeks ago on December 3rd. But again, there was no standalone version of this in the House. It was never debated or passed, and so this one dies with the 118th. We are also missing out on a couple of bills that follow up on a Congressional Dish episode that we did, Congressional Dish 280, which was about corporate junk fees. So there were two dingleberries in the original CR, which would have dealt with hotel and ticketing fees. So first, we are missing out on the Hotel Fees Transparency Act. Now, this dingleberry would have required platforms that sell hotel rooms to prominently display the total price of the accommodations and all mandatory fees. They only could have excluded the government taxes and fees. That total price would have had to be in their advertisements and visible at every stage of the booking process. In terms of enforcement, the Federal Trade Commission and state attorney generals would have been empowered to punish violators, but this wouldn't have taken effect until well into 2026. There was also the Transparency and Charges for Key Events Ticketing, or the Ticket Act. And this dingleberry would have made it so that ticket sellers would have been required to clearly display the total price of event tickets, inclusive of all fees, at the beginning of the ticket purchasing process. And if the event is canceled or postponed, customers would have been required to be offered full refunds or a ticket to the rescheduled event. It also would have made it illegal to sell tickets that you don't actually have, and websites wouldn't have been able to anymore pretend that they are affiliated with a venue team or artist if they are not. And again, just like the hotel one, the Federal Trade Commission and the state attorneys generals would have been empowered to punish violators. This one would have gone into effect much sooner. This one would have gone into effect in mid-2025. Now, as we know from Congressional Dish 280, again, that was called corporate junk fees, the provisions in these dingleberries were carefully crafted and debated, but only the standalone Ticket Act passed the House 388-24. Once again, all the no's were Republicans. Apparently, they like hidden fees. But that makes it another example of a bill that could have been easily passed by the Senate Democrats on their way out the door, along with the oh-so-important football stadium. But they chose not to do so with the power they had left in the 118th Congress, because I'm assuming they had planes to catch, and that's what mattered more in that moment. Now, when it comes to fees, there is a little bit of hope that even though Congress completely failed to do anything in the 118th, there is a federal agency that has acted. So in December, the Federal Trade Commission, via regulation, banned hidden hotel and ticketing fees in ways that are damn near identical to what those dingleberry bills would have done had they become law, in that hotels and ticketing agencies could still charge the fees, but they would have had to show us the total prices up front. Now, this new rule is supposed to take effect sometime in 2025, if it is allowed to stand once the Trump administration and Republican Congress takes power, well, today, because they could use the Congressional Review Act to nuke this regulation once they get to work. This is because the Congressional Review Act allows Congress to kill regulations issued by federal agencies within 60 legislative days. And since the FTC fees regulation wasn't finished until December, it qualifies for the Republican death penalty should they choose to use it. And in the beginning of the first Trump administration, which was the last time the Republicans had the White House, the House, and the Senate, they killed all kinds of regulations using the Congressional Review Act. And you should know that Congressional Review Act resolutions are not allowed to be filibustered. So the Republicans do have the votes that they need to murder this in the Senate if they want to. And so if you care about this, assuming that you don't like hidden fees, this would be an excellent time to call your Republican member of Congress and tell them to do nothing, which they're quite good at doing, and just let the FTC regulation take effect, which would make the loss of these customer-friendly dingleberries from the original continuing resolution effectively moot. Now, I don't know Elon Musk. I don't know him, but I don't like him. But the fact that I don't know him means that I can't call him up and ask him why he had a hissy fit and tried to kill this continuing resolution. I genuinely don't believe it's because he wanted the government to shut down, because he is a government contractor. I also don't think that he is passionate about allowing hidden fees or, making us more susceptible to pandemics. I don't think that was it. I think it is because he was protecting his own financial interests and his own financial future. Because there were some provisions in the original continuing resolution that I think were directly related to his businesses, and I think that's what he was trying to shut down. So before I give you the details of that, let's kind of look at the overall problem that we're having here so that you can understand what was put into the continuing resolution and why. And to summarize it in one sentence, the problem is that multinational corporations are partnering with countries considered to be our economic enemies, specifically China. The obsession here is all about China. And I watched a hearing about conflicts of interest with these multinational corporations, and it turns out it's a wide-ranging problem. So from the hearing, first I want to play you a clip from Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. He is speaking to a man named Dr. Rush Doshi, and Dr. Doshi is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, but more importantly, he's a professor at Georgetown University. And so here's their conversation about what the problem is when it comes to multinationals and their conflicts of interest.
Since 2008, the McKinsey company has done nearly $1 billion in consulting work for the United States government. $1 billion. And its top client has been the Defense Department. In fact, it's got contracts with the Defense Department, with the U.S. Department of the Navy, with the Homeland Security Department, with Customs and Border Patrol. I think in 2021 alone, McKinsey had Defense Department or other security agency contracts worth $850 million. It's absolutely extraordinary. And yet at the same time, they're also doing business with the Chinese government. They are simultaneously taking $1 billion from the United States and its security agencies and also getting money from not just China in general, from the Chinese government and Chinese-controlled entities. Explain to us why that is a problem. I think any normal American who's sitting out there and hears that would be absolutely outraged by it, and rightly so. Why are they getting taxpayer money advising our military and simultaneously advising the Chinese military? But just explain to us, why is this a national security concern?
Well, thank you, Senator Hawley. I agree this is a national security concern. I would go further. I mean, the nature of the work that McKinsey did reportedly involved helping China consider how to outcompete U.S. technology firms, how to strengthen Made in China 2025. The goal was to help them advance their goals for technological dominance. And that is directly at odds with the interests not just of the U.S. government, but also of the corporate clients they had in the United States that they were also advising. So there's a clear conflict of interest there. And it's also, the kind of conflict of interest that even if McKinsey had exercised better judgment about the projects it took on, other firms doing business in China are getting raided by the Chinese government. Oftentimes, that means that their data is no longer secure. And if they have U.S. client data on those servers, well, that's now Chinese data. So there's a lot of concerns, I think, that we can raise here. One is the nature of the work. Another is being a vector for the transfer of information and data. And there's a third concern, too, which is that some of these firms have mutually irreconcilable obligations to the United States and to China. China is basically saying, if you want to comply with the subpoena from this committee, you can't, because we have a data security law saying you can. That's three different kinds of conflicts beyond the one, Senator, that you just identified.
And Dr. Doshi continued.
The second thing that I'm worried about is not just our consulting firms that are doing contracting with the federal government and the Chinese government, it's our technology service providers. Because the U.S. government relies on these technology service providers for critical services. The Department of Defense, our defense industrial base, our water sector, our power sector, transportation, telecommunications. So if we have a conflict of interest where those companies go to China, share their source code, or enter into a joint venture, which can compromise that service, it affects all of us.
And that's where Elon Musk's businesses come into play. So, for example, Elon Musk's Tesla has built a gigafactory in China, which produced about 50% of Tesla's output over the last year. Also, in May of this year, Tesla broke ground on a new $200 million factory to manufacture large batteries critical to its electric vehicle supply chain, just down the street from its Shanghai car factory. And it is well known and discussed often in Congress, we've heard it on this show, that companies that operate in China are required to share their data with the Chinese government on demand. And so for Elon Musk to be operating such huge facilities in China, it seems safe to assume that he has chosen to accept those business terms. And so to put it bluntly, Elon Musk is a partner of the CCP, of the Chinese Communist Party. But his companies are also U.S. government contractors, important U.S. government partners. So, for example, Elon Musk's rocket company, SpaceX, received more than $100 million in federal loans and taxpayer subsidies since fiscal year 2000, and has won nearly $19.8 billion in federal contracts since 2008. And at least $100 million of the tax dollars funneled to Musk's company, SpaceX, were for missile tracking satellites. I can't think of data more sensitive than that. And so if Congress is concerned with companies that partner with both China and the United States governments and the obvious conflicts of interest inherent in those relationships, especially with the nature of some of the businesses that Elon Musk controls, they should be concerned by Elon Musk and others with conflict of interest like his. I know I am. And so this is the conversation that has been happening in Congress. Here's Dr. Doshi.
When it comes to technology service providers, the stakes are so high that we want these companies to think from a risk perspective that the risk of partnering with the PRC or working with the PRC or giving in to their demands is not going to be worth it given the significant revenue hit that they'll take from being cut off, not just from the Department of Defense, but a number of U.S. government agencies. So I want that balance to be in a more conservative direction.
Which brings me to a dingleberry to the continuing resolution that Elon Musk helped kill. And that is the Comprehensive Outbound Investment National Security Act of 2024. Now, this bill would have prohibited U.S. persons, aka companies, from investing in or with companies in China, Hong Kong, and Macau, so those are all Chinese, that engage in activities related to sensitive technologies such as semiconductors, microelectronics, quantum information technologies, and artificial intelligence, which is a sector that Elon Musk is in. As for enforcement, that dingleberry would have said that knowing violations of the act, including failure to submit required notifications, could result in civil or criminal liability, including individual liability, perhaps for the person at the top of the company, like Elon Musk. Now, this prohibition is kind of a big deal, and I do have to say that I could not find a standalone version of this dingleberry that had moved through Congress. And so there was no hearing, and there were no witnesses that had testified to Congress about its effects. I don't know where this bill came from. The process was simply atrocious. And so maybe this isn't the best idea. But the point is the ick factor of an oligarch like Elon Musk having the power to essentially get Congress to shut down a bill that would have regulated his own companies. Big ick. I also think that a motivation for Musk could have, again, I don't know the man, but a motivation for Elon Musk could have been the dingleberry, which was titled The Prohibition on Grants for Some Satellite Licenses, United States Market Access, or Earth Station Authorizations. And I'm too cosmically dumb to understand the specifics of this proposed ban that was killed in the now dead continuing resolution without doing a super deep dive on that. And because this bill is dead, it's not worth that amount of time right now. But what I do know is that Elon Musk is the majority shareholder, once again, of SpaceX, which is a company that has contracts with our government and other governments around the world. That company and Elon Musk are not 100% loyal to the United States. And Starlink, which is SpaceX's satellite internet service, it relies on market access and regulatory approvals in the United States and globally. And so any prohibition on satellite licenses or Earth station authorizations could limit Starlink's ability to expand. Maybe not by itself, but possibly in partnerships that would be targets of this provision. Also, so-called Earth stations are crucial for Starlink's infrastructure, ensuring ground-to-satellite communication. And so restrictions on authorizations for Earth stations could impede Starlink's ability to set up new stations or use stations set up by others, slowing down deployment and service quality improvements. And this bill definitely included Earth stations in its prohibition. Now, like I said, I don't fully understand what was being banned here. But I also have no way to really find out for you because there was no way to listen to a congressional debate on it that never happened. And this appears to be an edited version of a bill that was written by Frank Pallone, a Democrat in the House. His bill was called the Secure Space Act of 2023. But even that bill was never the subject of a hearing, and it never got a debate or a vote in the House. And so this too, this was an unexamined bill, and it wasn't even identical to the standalone one that got dingleberried onto that continuing resolution. This process was atrocious. Again, I'm not sure I even would have supported it. But it's all about the ick. Here's another provision banning something involving private space projects that I think is a suspect for an Elon Musk hissy fit. And so, after his hissy fit, this prohibition is not law. I have all the icks. So many icks. And another story, our last story that has to do with government funding. This one not only gave me the icks, it gave me quite a bit of rage. Because, as we all know, one of the reasons that all of this drama happened, in fact, the reason all of this drama happened is because the appropriations process just did not function in the 118th Congress. And that is essentially the fault of the appropriations committees, who didn't do their jobs. And when this Congress started, right up until April of this year, the chair of the Appropriations Committee was a Texas Republican named Kay Granger. She's currently 81 years old. But in April, she very quietly gave up her position as the chair of the Appropriations Committee to Tom Cole of Oklahoma. I didn't even notice that it happened. And then another thing that I didn't notice is that she just stopped voting on anything as of July 24th. Apparently, she couldn't be found anywhere in the Capitol for months, with the exception of one day in November when her portrait was unveiled in the Appropriations Committee. There's a picture of her. But even though she was in Congress that day in November, she still didn't vote. And so she was mainly absent, and some reporters noticed but couldn't get their emails to her office to be returned. However, we know that her staff was there because they were submitting statements into the congressional record right up until December 9th on behalf of Congresswoman Kay Granger, making it look as if she was there and participating in the debates. But in December, the Dallas Morning News confirmed that she hasn't been in Congress because she has, quote, dementia issues, unquote, and has been living in a senior living facility in Texas for months. Now, she didn't run for re-election, but she also never resigned from Congress. And I do have to say that if the cover-up of President Joe Biden's mental issues are a scandal, this is too. Showing once again that both parties are rotten to their cores. Whatever new low one party hits, the other is always close behind. So you had the Democrats hiding Biden's dementia, and then you had the Republicans just not bothering to tell anyone that Kay Granger was fucking gone because her brain doesn't work. So that might go to explain why the appropriations process was even more broken than usual, since she was not some backbencher. This isn't just some sad story of a lady who's diminishing. She's an extremely powerful person whose ego kept her in Congress until yesterday, January 2nd, 2025. unbelievable. There were also a few new laws. Well, there was actually a lot of new laws that were signed right at the end of the Congress. Most of them wouldn't affect most of us or were like naming post offices. But there's a couple that I just want to call out because they are interesting. So one new law that we now have is the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. And this one is notable because this was Paris Hilton's project. Now, I don't know if you are a Paris Hilton fan. I really enjoyed The Simple Life, I must say. It was a silly little reality show, which apparently was almost entirely fake, because Paris Hilton a few years ago released a documentary on YouTube. It's called This Is Paris. And even if you don't really like her, you probably know who she is. And I've got to tell you, this documentary is fascinating. I watched it by myself the first time, and because this was kind of homework for me, I convinced my husband to watch it with me last night. So thank you, Congress, for making that possible. But he really enjoyed it too, because it's really interesting stuff. She is not who you think she is. And she went through some stuff that I had absolutely no idea until I saw this documentary. And it's given her a drive to go around the country trying to get legislation that she thinks would help people. So I'm going to play right now a montage that I've made from her documentary. But again, I do recommend watching the entire thing. I've put it in the show notes for you. But here's what Paris Hilton went through that led to her lobbying Congress for a bill. So you're going to hear this clip. It starts with a memory from Paris Hilton's younger sister, Nikki Hilton, and then the rest of the clip is Paris herself.
I remember it was a school night, it was the middle of the night, and I just heard screaming, bloody murder. I knew there was a takedown in the works. I didn't know it was people coming in and capturing her.
I thought I was being kidnapped. I started screaming for my mom and dad, like, help me. And no one came. As they were taking me, I saw my parents standing by their door crying. And I was like, please help me, what's happening? And no one would tell me what was happening. There's all these places called emotional growth schools. The first place was in the middle of nowhere. We were building other camps, basically doing manual labor all day long. It was just constant yelling at, like, boot camp style. So I whispered to one of the girls, like, let's get out of here tonight. We ran through cornfields, through mountains. The guys that worked at the camp grabbed us, and then we got back and they literally just beat the hell out of us in front of everyone, just to let everyone know, if you run away, this is what happens. And then they sent me to this other place, which was hell too, and I ran away from there. Escaped from Ascent, Cascade, CEDU. All of these emotional growth schools. The last school that I went to was Provo Canyon School. And that was the worst of the worst. There's no getting out of there. You're sitting on a chair, staring at a wall all day long, getting yelled at or hit. I felt like a lot of the people who work there got off on torturing children and seeing them naked. They would prescribe everyone all these pills. I didn't know what they were giving me. I would just feel so tired and numb. Some people in that place were just gone. Like, the lights are on, no one's home. A lot of people were on suicide watch. And I was so scared that was gonna happen to me. So eventually, I found out a way to not take the pills. But everyone would tell on everyone, and they found a Kleenex with all of the pills in it. And I got in so much trouble for that. Solitary confinement. Like something out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They'd make people take their clothes off and go in there like for 20 hours. Felt like I was going crazy. Someone was in the other room that was like in a straitjacket, screaming. I was just freezing, I was starving, I was alone, I was scared. My parents were in New York. They didn't know. I don't know if my nightmares will ever go away, but I do know that there's probably hundreds of thousands of kids who are going through the same thing right now. And maybe if I can help stop their nightmares, it will help me stop mine.
And so Paris Hilton, since that documentary dropped a few years ago, has been working on getting bills passed at both the state and federal level. And I don't follow state stuff closely, but I do know that she was successful in at least getting something passed in California, which took effect this week on New Year's Day. And she was successful in the U.S. Congress, in the 118th Congress, which passed the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act, and which has been signed by President Biden. This bill requires the Health and Human Services Secretary to do a study on youth residential programs and make recommendations. And so essentially, there's going to be a police spotlight shining on these facilities for seemingly the first time. And based on their study, I do imagine there would be enforcement after that. And I do want to say that I'm not going to name names because I don't know if that would be appreciated or if it's appropriate. I don't know. But there is a member of our community, he's a staffer, who played a role in getting this passed. And he also wrote a bill. Now, the bill has his boss's name on it, but we know who wrote it, for disaster aid. And so I just want to say congratulations to this Congressional Dish community member. I am so proud of you. This is so cool. And also cool is the final new law that I want to tell you about today. Now, this is obviously the most important law that was passed in the 118th Congress. Thanks to S4610, the bald eagle is now officially our national bird. God bless America. And then the last thing I want to tell you about when it comes to bills and laws, I want to talk to you about the 118th Congress's H.R. 1, because the fate of this bill was super weird. So the bill number being number 1 is significant. The way it works in Congress is that bill numbers are determined based on what order the bills are introduced in. But that only starts when you get to H.R. 11. H.R. 1 through 10 are reserved for particularly important bills, and it is the party that is in charge that gets to determine which get these important, significant bill numbers, right? And so because of this, H.R. 1 is generally the most important priority of a Congress. And so for the Republicans in the 118th Congress who controlled the House, H.R. 1 was a fossil fuel favor bill. It essentially would have deemed the exportation or importation of natural gas to be in the public interest, regardless of what the agencies think. It would have repealed taxes on gas. It would have gotten rid of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It would have forced oil and gas lease sales in Wyoming, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Nevada, and Alaska. It would have forced the approval of leases for coal mining. It would have made fossil fuel permitting faster and easier. And under a heading that was, quote, homeowner energy freedom, unquote, H.R. 1 would have repealed billions of dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act that are currently available for us regular people, to use to upgrade our home appliances and be more energy efficient. That was the number 1 priority of the Republicans in the 118th Congress. And that is what they passed on March 30th, 2023, by a vote of 225 to 204. And just so you know, there was only 1 Republican who voted no on that, and there were 4 Democrats who voted yes. Here's where this is interesting, because to become law, it would have to go over to the Senate and be passed in identical form. And the Senate was controlled by Democrats. That was never going to happen. What's interesting about H.R. 1 is that it was never delivered to the Senate. So usually what happens is the House passes a bill, it goes to the Senate, and then the members of Congress over in the House side can be like, the Senate has let our most important priorities die. And they did say that, except it was only sitting on their own desks. They never actually sent it over to the Senate. So even if the Democrats wanted to take it up and amend it or do anything with it, they didn't have that ability. And I've never seen that before. And I don't know if that is incompetence or did they not want HR 1 to actually have a chance of moving forward for some reason. I have no idea. I just found that incredibly weird and wanted to tell you. Also very weird, like I said, they had 10 bill numbers for their most important stuff. They didn't even use close to the full 10. So in the border bill episode that I did, we talked about HR 2, which was their immigration bill. There was no HR 3 or 4. Then HR 5 was a patient's bill of rights. Then there was no HR 6. HR 7 was an abortion-related bill. And then there was no HR 8, 9, or 10. None of those became law. It's just very weird way to run a Congress. So yeah, just thought that was interesting. Also interesting, this is where we get into the gossip, because we got time. There was a couple ethics committee reports that were released at the end of the Congress that I read and just found interesting. So first of all, I bet you know this is coming. We got the report on Matt Gaetz. Now, Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress, and most people think he resigned so that this report would never be released. This happened after Donald Trump said that he wanted Matt Gaetz to be the next Attorney General of the United States. But the Ethics Committee was almost done with their report. And in general, if someone is not a member of Congress, usually their Ethics Committee reports are not released. And so Matt Gaetz resigned, we think. I mean, again, I don't know the guy, but the people that are in Washington, D.C., the reporters that I trust, everyone seems to think that he resigned from Congress to stop this report from coming out, and then it came out anyway. And so here's what it found, and it's pretty juicy. It said, quote, "The committee found evidence that Representative Gaetz spent tens of thousands of dollars on women with who he had a shared understanding that they would be compensated for sexual activity with him," unquote. Also said, quote, "Representative Gaetz took advantage of the economic vulnerability of young women to lure them into sexual activity for which they received an average of a few $100s after each encounter. Such behavior is not generosity to ex-girlfriends as Gaetz had claimed." And the report also said that these are violations of state prostitution laws. Another heading in this report says that, quote, "The committee found that Representative Gaetz violated Florida's statutory rape law because, quote, "there is substantial evidence that Representative Gaetz engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl," unquote. Talk about icks. The report said that this happened in July 2017 when she was 17 and he was 35, which is a violation of the statutory rape law. The next heading says, quote, "The committee found Representative Gaetz used illegal drugs," unquote. And the report said that Gaetz was using cocaine, ecstasy, and marijuana between 2017 and 2020 in violation of state laws. And in the way that this affects the House is it says that he, quote, "appears to have set up a pseudonymous email," I don't know if I'm saying that word correctly, but let's go with it, "email account from his House office in the Capitol complex for the purpose of purchasing marijuana," unquote. Who buys marijuana via email? Just go and meet the guy behind the target like everybody else does. What's the matter with Matt Gaetz? Apparently, there's a lot the matter with Matt Gaetz, as the committee also found that, quote, "Representative Gaetz violated the House gift rule." And the report says, quote, "There is substantial evidence that Representative Gaetz received impermissible gifts in connection with his travel to the Bahamas in September of 2018. Specifically, Representative Gaetz accepted travel via a private plane and other travel costs," unquote. And then the report said some stuff about this that I think is just interesting in understanding how the House rules work. So reading straight from the report, quote, "The gift rule requires members to apply to the committee for a waiver to accept gifts of personal friendship with a fair market value over a threshold amount. For travel via private plane, the committee has provided extensive guidance. Less than a year after Representative Gaetz's flight from the Bahamas trip, the committee circulated a reminder about that guidance to the House community, noting that practically any flight on a non-commercial aircraft that will exceed $250 in value will hence require committee approval. The flight, lodging, meal, and entertainment expenses on the Bahamas trip that were incurred but not paid by Representative Gates were well in excess of the personal friendship threshold. The committee also found evidence that Representative Gates impermissibly accepted private plane travel on other occasions. On top of that, the report found that, quote, Representative Gates dispensed special privileges and favors to individuals with whom he had a personal relationship. And about this, they said, quote, the committee found substantial evidence that Representative Gates used the power of his office to assist a woman with whom he was engaged in a sexual relationship with in obtaining an expedited passport. The woman was not his constituent, and the case was not handled in the same manner as similar passport assistance cases, unquote. Like, Matt Gaetz, Jesus. Someone's a bit of a sex hound. And then finally, the committee found that Representative Gates sought to obstruct its investigation of his conduct. And so that is the person that Donald Trump wanted to be our Attorney General. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. And then, on the same day that that was dropped, and obviously that is the story that went everywhere, because how juicy and gross is that one? But on the same day that that Ethics Committee report was released, there was another one that was released on Michael McCaul. He's the Republican chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the 118th Congress. And his report said that on November 21st, 2024, misdemeanor charges were filed against Representative McCaul for public intoxication at the Washington Dulles International Airport. And then on December 13th, the charges were voluntarily dismissed. But I just find that interesting because how hammered do you have to be to get busted for being drunk in an airport? That's like the only place where it is acceptable to be hammered at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and yet the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee got so wasted that he got arrested in the airport. That's amazing. How do you do that? But didn't affect his congressional term because he got elected to an 11th term in Congress, although, the day that this happened was after the election. So, there's that. I guess he felt pretty free to get bombed after winning that election. But I am happy to tell you that he is term limited as the Foreign Affairs Committee chair. He's going to be replaced by Brian Bast of Florida. So he's not going to be as powerful as he was before, but wow. I did a lot of binge drinking, including in airports, and never got in any trouble. That's one of the easiest places to be bombed in the United States. Wow, that was a pun I didn't intend. But you know what I mean. And then finally, I found out through the Ethics Committee reports that Victoria Spartz, who's another Republican congresswoman, she got arrested at Dulles Airport this year too. Why are so many members of Congress getting arrested at Dulles? But she got charged on June 28th, 2024 for traveling through Dulles security with an unloaded handgun. Who thinks that's okay? So yeah, we just seem to have idiots in Congress, and they're all coming back, except for Matt Gaetz, and good riddance. Okay, so that's about all we've got for the 118th Congress. It's over, and I'm pretty excited about that, except for the fact that we have a Congress just like it coming up in the 119th. So brace yourself, folks. I will tell you that I am going to be doing things differently in the 119th Congress. I'm going to be working on staying more current for myself and for you, because one of the things that I still haven't figured out after 6 Congresses is how to do deep dives and stay current and know what's going on in the day-to-day. And so I have some ideas, and I think you're going to hear me experimenting with those over the next couple of months, so be prepared for that. But yeah, thank you for listening and for supporting the show. And I would especially like to thank our executive producers. These are the people that have paid at least $535 to support this show. And in return for that, you get to put your vouch on an episode that you consider especially valuable, which moves it up the most valuable episodes list. And those are the episodes that seem to get listened to the most often because they are determined to be the best episodes by the people who are paying for this show. And I am thrilled to announce that we have 2 more executive producers. So one is now Brett Newsai, and he is going to be our executive producer for episode 301, which was the 2024 election study guide. And his message says, I chose this episode because I found it helpful as a voter and appreciated the recap of the term. Well, thank you for putting your EP credit on that. I also think that that is one of the most important episodes I've done, because what's the point of all of this if we're not using it to vote? So yeah, thanks for putting a credit on that. And then we also now have a credit on Congressional Dish 305, Freaky Food, which I really love because I got quite a bit of pushback from that episode from people who, A, don't like RFK Jr., and B, really don't like the information that their food isn't perfectly fine. And so Stephen Dinger is now our executive producer on that episode, and he sent in a message. He said, hey, Jen, I loved episode 305, Freaky Food, and would like to use my executive producer credit. I've been waiting for a food system episode for a long time, and here it is. So good. I've been a health nut for years and have been preaching so much of the information in this episode to my friends and family. Food can be our medicine or our poison. For me, food has been central in my life since becoming a regenerative farmer in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a union worker-owned business called Our Harvest Cooperative. Our Harvest grows produce on roughly 8 acres, and we do everything chemical-free while stewarding the land and doing our best to create family-sustaining jobs. We created Our Harvest Cooperative in 2012, around the time Congressional Dish began, and have struggled in the Cincinnati produce market, competing with giant grocery chains, primarily Kroger, who is headquartered here in Cincinnati. The big chains won't buy from us small growers who refuse to accept low prices for our goods or give them control of our growing practices. We have even been shut out of regenerative touting outlets like Whole Foods, so we are focusing more on direct-to-consumer through our CSA subscription model. I think you and the Congressional Dish community would find our cooperative model interesting because we are trying to create an alternative to the corporate capitalist system. Not to get into too much detail, but Our Harvest Cooperative is part of a larger cooperative network of worker-owned businesses led by Coop Cincy, our Coop incubator who assists startup businesses as well as organizes workers of existing businesses to become a cooperative when the owner ages out. So far, there are 15 other businesses in our Cincinnati network. The focus is a democratic workplace and good jobs. Coop Cincy emerged from a group of activists sick of fighting corporate industries for better working conditions for the workers, and so came together after discovering Mondragon, the largest worker-owned cooperative in the world out of the Basque region of Spain. Mondragon has been our technical support for implementing their structure and governance. Look them up. They are amazing. It gives me hope because the cooperative movement across the country and the globe is growing. Anyways, I just wanted to let the Dish community know that there are proactive organizations making tangible change. Jen, Congressional Dish has been invaluable to me on my journey to being an informed citizen. My sister Maria turned me onto the Dish in 2017, I think, and I have been religiously listening to the podcast during my days on the farm. I've also really gotten into We're Not Wrong as well. You are making a difference whether you see it or not. Keep up the good work, and I'm looking forward to more excellent episodes in 2025. Yours truly, Stephen Dinger. And he puts in a PS here. I grew up playing volleyball here in Cincinnati, and I miss having the AVP tournament here. I was excited to hear in a recent episode that the traveling volleyball clinic was in Loveland, Ohio, which is where I grew up. He's talking about Better at Beach. I know exactly where they hold it. I haven't played competitively since college intramurals, but I enjoy some backyard ball now and then. Well, Stephen, I do think that we are kindred spirits, and I love, love, love your idea behind Our Harvest Cooperative, and I love knowing that it exists. So if you're in the Cincinnati area, please go and support our Congressional Dish community and the community that they're building with healthy food. I think that's really, really cool, and thank you for sharing that with us. I love when you guys write in. You know, even though I'm not doing the thank you episodes anymore, which longtime listeners know that I used to read every producer email that came in, and that just became like a whole second job. So I don't do that anymore, but I still read all of the messages, and I still love them. And I just, when I'm not feeling this job, when I'm just not feeling it, getting to read your messages and find out who you are and know who's listening and especially who's supporting the show. We really do have an amazing community of incredible people here. So I'm really grateful for all of you, but especially the executive producers. And I'm really oddly looking forward to this next Congress. I think I have some good ideas for how to deep dive and stay current. I still feel like I don't know quite how to do this show, but I'm getting closer with every Congress, and every Congress is an opportunity to try new things. And so I'm excited to do that. I just feel like I have a better grasp on this. So even though the support went down this year, I do think 2025 and 2026, I do think I'm going to do some good work here because I have a plan and I think it's better than the old one. So we'll see. Yeah, thanks for supporting me and help me do this. And I'm looking forward to giving you more excellent episodes in 2025. All right. I'm going to go and get ready for the next episode. So the next episode is going to be about, we're getting serious now because the next episode is going to be released, should be the day before the inauguration. It's time to accept the fact that the Trump administration is coming back. And so the next episode is going to be about the possible ramifications of the Supreme Court case that gave the president, officially some limited immunity. There was a hearing about that I think we should just hear and be aware of. So that's what the next episode is going to be. And while I'm in the process of creating that one, I'm also going to be working on reading the National Defense Authorization Act. That was done by the end of the year. That is what authorizes our war things. As we know, during the Biden administration, the world definitely became a less peaceful place. I know that looking at what Congress authorized isn't necessarily going to match what the Trump administration is going to do, because who the hell knows what the Trump administration is going to do? It's always more chaotic than, standard lizards who control our country. But yeah, I'm still going to read it and see what's allowed and see if there's anything that jumps out at me in there. So yeah, sometime I'm hoping by the end of February, we'll have an episode looking at foreign policy. God help us. All right. That's it for now. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, if the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it lies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan solutions that actually solve problems.